right, today we are beginning our 7-week series entitled The Message of the Miracles. And we're following the book of John. John tells about seven miracles, or sometimes they're called signs. And what do signs do? They tell us something, exactly. They tell you to stop. They tell you to yield. They tell you what the speed limit is. They tell you something. They're informative. And the miracles that we're going to read about and study over the next 7 weeks all tell us something about Jesus. John says at the end of his book, if I had told you everything Jesus did, I suppose the world could not contain the volumes that it would take to explain all that. And so you must kind of step back and think, wow, then if he only picked 7, there must be significance to each of these 7. They must tell us something very significant about Jesus for John to tell us about these particular 7. And we're going to study those. Today we'll start with Jesus' first miracle. Then we will end with Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead on Easter Sunday. We thought that would be kind of a good and fun way to end the series, is on Easter Sunday, talk about raising the dead. All right, get your Bibles. And let's look at John chapter 2 together. All the miracles tell us something about Jesus. We're going to read, and so here's what we're going to do today. We're going to first study through together the first 11 verses, and then come back and ask the question, okay, what is it we're supposed to learn about Jesus after we've done that? But there's a couple of interesting verses that I think we need to dig through first to really, I think, understand it all. So let's read together. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." All right, well, let's stop and go back and get just a little bit of background here, if we could. As much as we know about Jewish weddings of that day, here's kind of the way it would go. There would be a betrothal. We would call that sort of an engagement. And that would last for a period of time. You remember that when Mary became pregnant with Jesus, she was betrothed to be married to Joseph. All right? And then after this betrothal period, there would come a day where there would actually be a ceremony, much like what we do. And then after the ceremony, there would be this procession to the bride's house, and they would leave the bride there. The groom would go to his house, and he would make preparations to bring his bride. And this should be reminding you of stories that Jesus later tells when the bridegroom comes. And remember, he talks about we should always be ready. Well, there would be no reason you wouldn't be ready. You just had a ceremony. You know he's coming to get you, right? And so the groom would go home. He would prepare. Many times they would add on a room in the house for the couple to live in for a period of time. And when all the preparations were made, there was sort of a master of ceremonies, or a caterer, if you please, who kind of ran the show. And when it was ready, the groom with his family would go get the bride. And they would get the bride and her family. And then there was this cool procession that they would go, and they would take the longest route possible through the city in order to enjoin all the people of the city in it, so they could enjoy the celebration. And there was this big, joyous parade through town, and eventually they would land at the groom's house. And then they would start this huge party that would many times go for a week in celebrating this couple. And people would come, and it was just this huge, joyous event. Well, Jesus is there. He's been invited with his mom and with some of his disciples to be a part of this. Wine played a particular important role in a Jewish feast. We read about it so many times in the Bible, and it's almost always associated with joy, with thanksgiving, with feasting, with happiness. It was a requirement at a Jewish wedding. Lots of wine, because that was the symbol of what a joyous occasion it was, and that theme is used throughout the Bible, New and Old Testament. So they come to this wedding, and somewhere in this wedding, in this celebration, there is one of the most dreadful, embarrassing things that happens. Think of it as, you know, you're getting married, and you're catering your wedding, and you've invited everyone. You got your list, and you've got 200 people that are invited to sit down with you and to have a big meal together. And then somebody comes to you during that and says, there's still 50 people in the line, and we're totally out of food. Now you get the feeling of what was going on. And you can imagine this poor couple. You can imagine the master of ceremonies, the caterer, whoever he is, the panic, what they must be feeling. We are ruining their special celebration. We don't have any more wine. And so we have verse 4. Jesus' mother says to him in verse 3, they have no more wine. We'll come back to that phrase in a moment. Verse 4, dear woman. Some of the versions just say woman. And it actually is just the opposite of that. It's the same thing Jesus said on the cross when he said, woman, behold your son. It's a very endearing term. Not, now woman! It's not that. I do like what the NIV has done here, and they say, dear woman, because it is a term of affection. Why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my time has not yet come. Now, I used to believe something about this verse, and I've definitely changed my mind about this. I used to think that Jesus' mom stepped in and changed his mind. But if you dig into this more, you're going to find out that's not what is going on here at all. So there's a very interesting phrase, and the phrase in Greek, literally translated, is this: what to you and to me. That is what the NIV translates, dear woman, why do you involve me? But what it actually says is, dear woman, what to you and to me. And it is the Greek equivalent of a Hebrew idiom, a phraseology that people would have used frequently, and they knew exactly. I brought my water because I was afraid I was going to run out up here today. I was going to work that in somewhere, but I got all kinds of little things I want to work in today, but it probably won't happen. Where was I? Oh, what to thee and me. It's a phraseology, and basically here's what it's saying. What to you, what to me. And what Jesus is saying to his mom is this: what this means to you and what this means to me are very different things. And it makes the next phrase make sense. My time has not yet come. Now, my time, that day, that hour, meaning my time has not yet come. The whole reason I came to the earth. Remember, this is the first miracle. Jesus is going to reveal his glory. That's how the story ends. He's telling the world, I'm God in the flesh. I'm God's son. I've come to the world. And Jesus knew that this miracle would be the beginning of the end. Time hasn't come, but he's looking at his mom and he's saying, tell you though, he knew he was going to do the miracle. In fact, what she says next, his mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. She knew he was going to do it too. There wasn't any confusion about that. He was just taking a moment to pause and to say, what to you and what to me? To Mary, this is going to be awesome. My son is going to fix the problem. There's going to be a party. It's going to be great. And Jesus is thinking, yeah, I'm going to do that. But then they're going to know who I am. And that path to the cross starts right here. That's that conversation. Okay? Knew what he was going to do. I love what his mother does say, and this is another sermon, another day. But if we want the miracles, look at verse 5. Do whatever he tells you. Sometimes we forget that part. It wasn't going to make sense to them. He wants us to go get what? A bunch of jars and fill them up with water. Just do what he says and watch what happens. You know, sometimes we just need the faith to do what he says. Nearby stood 6 stone jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. So you've got, it says in a minute, they filled it to the brim. I'm going to go with 30, and so that's 180 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water, so they filled them to the brim. Again, I love that phrase. Just can't preach on it today. And then he told them, now, draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and he said, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink, but you've saved the best till now. Now let's work our way through that one just for a second, because I know what you're thinking. These people are getting drunk. I don't believe that's all what it's saying. What it's saying is this. In fact, drunkenness was really looked down upon at a Jewish wedding because it's about the couple. What is true, though, if you've had a glass of wine or two, after a while you can't taste the difference between really good wine and cheap wine. Why? Because you've had too much. Your palate is saturated. If you've ever gone to a wine tasting, they give you a sip of wine, you taste that one, and what do they do next? They give you a cracker. They give you something. What is the purpose of that? To cleanse your palate so that you can actually taste the next one. So what he's saying is nobody does what you've done here. What they typically do is they bring out the good stuff, impress everybody, and then after they've had that, they start bringing out the watered down, the cheap stuff. And he's blown away, and he goes, I've never seen this. You're a pretty cool groom there. This is quite the party, because not only have you brought out this wine, it's the best wine. Now, wouldn't you have loved to have seen the look on those two guys' faces? Because the caterer, the guy in charge, he knows he didn't do it. And all the groom has heard is we're out of wine. And now all of a sudden somebody's telling him, not only do we have all the wine we need, it's fine wine. I would just love to have seen them look at each other. You know, I don't know. I'm afraid if I'd been there, I might have gone, yeah, I took care of you, bro. You know. Oh, don't we do that sometimes, though? We want to take credit for what God has done. So, in verse 11, he says, this is the first of his miraculous signs Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith into him. I get the idea Jesus, after this, got a lot of invitations to weddings. I would have invited him. Amen. Wonderful story. A feel-good story. Jesus' first miracle. But what are we supposed to get out of this? I mean, it's a nice story. You go, did John just, some people call this a warm-up miracle. He's going to work up to the bigger ones, And so let's step back and see if we can maybe glean what it is that John is trying to tell us about Jesus. And I don't think you have to over-spiritualize all of this to really understand who Jesus is, okay? So here's the first thing that I believe he's telling us about Jesus. Jesus says, I care about your stuff. It would be so easy as Jesus is revealing himself as God to come into this world and they go, Jesus, his mother comes and says, Jesus, look at this poor couple. Oh, it's so sad. They've run out of wine. They have no more wine. And Jesus to say, why, woman, do not involve me with such trivial matters of the world, for I have come to save the world. And some deep spiritual speech. He came to do that. But it tells you a lot about Jesus. Here is a miracle where there's nobody sick, there's nobody dying, there's nobody that's been born blind or that's crippled. It's just a couple's disappointment. And it's Jesus' way of involving himself and saying, I care about your day. I care about your disappointment. I care about what is hurting you. He makes it onto the scene the way he first reveals himself. The first miracle is a miracle that just simply says, I care about your stuff. Notice it wasn't in some big healing line in a big sideshow. It was in a humble home, very much in secret and in quiet. The two guys involved don't even know who did it, right? It's just a quiet way of saying, I care about you. I care about your stuff. That says a lot about Jesus. Because we all got our stuff. And isn't it great to know what he's teaching us in this miracle? Right from the beginning of Jesus' ministry is, he cares. The second thing that I think he's telling us is, you see this great picture of changing water into wine, and Jesus makes the party go on. And what he's saying is, this is what I want to do with your life. This is what I came into the world to do. Is to come into the world and find the people who feel like this phrase. You ever feel like that when it says, they have no more wine? You ever feel like the party's run out? You ever feel a little bit lost about maybe where you're going in life, or it hasn't turned out the way you expected? And you've got sort of this feeling in you that just goes, I don't know. It was good there for a while. The party was going. But I guess the party's over. And isn't what John is communicating here in this miracle is that Jesus is saying the best isn't past, guys. Not when I'm there. The best is yet to come. I know as a church leader, you can feel that way about a church sometimes. Are our best days back there? Or are yet they still ahead of us? You can say the same thing about your marriage. Lord, I don't know. It feels like the wine has run out. I think we relate on so many levels in our hearts. And isn't what Jesus is communicating is this: when Jesus is there, the best is yet to come. The fine wine is coming because Jesus is there. And it's Jesus saying, that's what I want to do for you. And boy, how much time do we spend running through life trying to go, if I can just get this or do this, then I'll feel better. Then my energy will come back, and my zeal and everything will be better again. And Jesus is saying, that's what this story is about. It's me that you're after. You have my picture. If you put this picture up, I think I showed this Wednesday night, I'm not sure. This was this past Monday. Very, very dear friends of ours. That's Sam and Connie McDonald, their daughter Ori. They buried their 18-year-old daughter a week ago yesterday. We've been dear friends a long time. We talk on the phone. They live in Birmingham, Alabama. That's where we were last weekend. Got to visit the church over there, see a lot of folks. On Monday, we went to breakfast with Sam and Connie for about 3 hours. They just buried their daughter 2 days before. We were talking at breakfast, and you know how it kind of always ends up. The ladies are down here and the guys are up here. And so, I'm just talking to Sam, and I said, Sam, I've been in the ministry 37 years. There's just nothing you can say. I said, I'm just sitting here looking at you as my friend. I know there's not a word I can say that's appropriate, that's going to help, that's going to fix anything. I'm just sitting here at a loss. What are you thinking? What? He goes, Rick, there's not a word I can say back. Here's what he said. He said, the only thing I've come up with is God's got us. He said, God has had us through this 18-year journey with their daughter. She was born with a heart defect. And it took so much time and energy. I shared this with the youth and family. I talked a lot about this trip. I shared this with youth and family on this past Wednesday. One of the things that he looked across the table and he said, Rick, I have no regrets. I took a less paying job to be able to spend more time with my daughter. I took her to school every morning of her life. When she got old enough, we stopped for coffee every morning before we went to high school. I said to her everything I wanted to say. I have zero regrets. I wonder how many of us can say that in life. He said, here's the only thing I know. God's got us. And that's all that matters. And I thought, wow. Isn't that what this miracle is saying? Hey guys, I got you. I got you. And that's all that matters. If I'm here, I will be the answer to your disappointments. I care about your life, and this is what I want to do with your life. Now, if we really believe that, then the next part of this story gets really, really good. When we let God have our life. And Jesus is saying in this miracle, that's what I want to do with you. I want to turn your watered down life into fine wine. So then we get to the third thing. And that is, isn't this miracle saying it will be so much better than you can imagine? It will be so much better than you can imagine. Jesus comes to the earth, his first miracle. He's at a wedding feast. There's just something right and appropriate about that. There's just something that God is communicating to say, to follow Jesus, to be with Jesus. It is the greatest joy of your life. It's a party. Jesus isn't the big killjoy. He goes to the wedding and he has a huge part in this wedding because he saves the day. He says, I want the party to continue. And this couple in their disappointment, Jesus is saying, hey, look, it's not a crime to enjoy life, guys. And then here's what he does. He takes 180 gallons of water. You have 180 gallons of water sitting right here. And he turns that water into wine. The equivalent of 9 probably means it's time to quit if he's... Each one of these bottles is 3 liters. There's 750 milliliters in a bottle of wine. 4 bottles per jug. 900 bottles of wine that Jesus made. What is Jesus trying to say to us? Wouldn't it have been nice if Jesus showed up with a bottle of wine to the wedding? Well, thank you, Jesus, for that nice gesture. It kind of comes in handy because we're out of wine. 1 bottle, here we go. I mean, he was being a gracious guest, and he brought a bottle of wine to the wedding. And Jesus says, no. I'm bringing 900 bottles of wine. The party is going to continue. And that is what I want to do in your life. And how many times do we go, hey, Jesus, thanks for the sip. That is not what he's telling us in this miracle. That's why I wanted the equivalent of 900 bottles. That's what he wants to do in your life. I care about your life. Let me take care of that life. And I will guarantee you, it'll be better than you could ever imagine it to be. Isn't that what he said in John chapter 10, verse 10? I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. That's what John is telling us in this miracle. Let me ask you a question. Are you bored? Hopefully not right now, but are you bored in life? I look at particularly Americans. I love it when I get to travel outside of America. People don't look bored. Sometimes they don't know where the next meal's coming from, but they don't look bored. And I look around sometimes and I go, we're a bored people, and we try then with every game or this or that or whatever to try somehow to get that feeling back. You know, we're living water and Jesus is offering wine. But we feel that. And I believe that is exactly what he is communicating in this miracle. Not only did he create 900 bottles of wine, but it was the finest wine. That's what he wants to do in our lives. That's why he came. This wasn't a miracle that was about a wedding or even about wine. Jesus is saying, it's not the wine, it's me. I'm what you need. And if I can do this, think about what I can do in your life. And I believe John would tell us, yeah, I told you that is the first miracle because I wanted to introduce you to Jesus in a pretty cool way. But every single time he gets a hold of a life, that miracle happens all over again. He takes water, he turns it into fine wine in an abundance that we could never imagine. That's what he wants to do in your life. And that's the story of the first miracle. What is the message of that miracle? I care about your stuff. I do. This is what I want to do with your life. And it's going to be so much better than you could ever imagine. Just look. You going to let Jesus, remember verse 5, I believe it was, do what he says. If we'll just do what he says, guys, this miracle tells us we have an amazing, wonderful life. If you're feeling like life's been watered down, Jesus is the answer. Amen.